of these news confirms our existing bias. If you see somebody translating a extreme view on a particular religion, and you or I already hold that extreme view, we will simply believe it or want to believe it to be true, because that is our mindset. And sometimes translation of these fake news very fast is because a lot of us actually believe them or want them to be true. It could be, I don't want to take specific examples, but I'm sure you all understand what I'm talking about. Like if you take for in the US, there are certain sections of people who think black people are supposed to be inferior. And if you share false news that a black guy or an Afro-American person had robbed a store, even though if it's fake, they will immediately transfer it because their mind, they think African Americans are robbers or something like that. Pre-confirmed bias. So when you see a nose, this can be applied to all walks of our belief system. It can be not just about what we think about people or other human beings, even our own religion. Sometimes our religions make us to be, what do you say, they have a certain belief system, and when there is the news about the belief system, even though it may not be true, they will say and forward it because it confirms the bias. And that's one of the dangerous factors. That's why we believe or we transmit fake news. The second one is, as I mentioned, if I'm searching for mobile phones or if I'm searching for motorbikes, there is emotions are target. As Indians, I mean, as you can see, I'm very much an Indian, so we are generally emotional people. Even though in sometimes when I grew up in Chennai, even though I used to be surprised when somebody says something about a movie star they like, people get really angry. Oh, how can you say about my Talewa or whatever like that? Even though in never in his life this person would have met the actor or the actor even knows of his existence, but they take it so personally because generally we are very emotional people. It's not just Indians per se. Human beings are generally very emotional. It maybe the level of emotions differ from countries, but so these fake news also target our emotions again. And the last one is the illusory truth effect. Illusory truth effect is when you constantly repeat a news. And there is a couple of TV channels in India where you will see, or in most channels in India, they see breaking news and they'll keep flashing the news. Oh, this is what is happening. Oh, what will I do today? What will I do tomorrow? What is the situation in China? They will keep flashing it. Sometimes it is truthful and sometimes it is not. But even that illusory truth effect of constantly feeding into your brain eventually starts to just process it as true, even if it is false. So, and the last one, this quote by Lemony Snicket, who was a popular author, is the sad truth is sad. Why do we worship movie stars? Why do we like Avengers, Spider-Man, or Rajinikanth so much, even though sometimes what they show in television or in the movies is so much non-realistic or fantastical? Because our lives are sometimes just normal and we want to live the non-normal fantastical things. That's why we are drawn to things that are not truthful, but at least it is better than our realities. And that is true. Sometimes truth is sad. It's a reality that faces you in times of conflict or in times of your daily 9-to-5 job, or if you're a poor person working in a difficult situation, or if you're stressed. It doesn't matter if you're poor or rich. I mean, if you're stressed, you just want some escapism from that. And that's why truth, our reality, is sad. And so we often tend to be drawn towards fake news. These are the reasons fake news is spread according to psychologists. And the problem for disaster management as agencies, whether you are a government agency or a donor or like the Mercy that the gentleman before me spoke, agencies like that, the biggest challenge public safety agencies and organizations face is to reduce and eliminate the spread of false information, especially as public demands for response from these authorities increase. So if you see this poster, this newspaper article, it's an article from front page article from 1943, where they're talking about how dinosaurs, Nazis are having dinosaurs and how people were attacking, and just to create this news was generated by the Nazi regime to influence the morale of the allied forces to believe that, to make them believe that they cannot win this war. So it's not new phenomena. It's just that it has become more spread because of the power of the internet and social media. But fake news has existed as long as there was news. So the problem these agencies face is when they are dealing with a real crisis like corona or natural disasters or rainfall or flooding, and then they're trying to sort and plan a strategy or a response mechanism. The big block is from people is to when they created fear, and it becomes so difficult for challenges to be addressed because people don't want to listen to legitimate sources because they are masked by all this number of fake sources. And because social media can distribute news faster to a wider audience, this has become a lot more issue. A factor that may also impede first responders. Who are first responders when there's a crisis, when there's a fire, or when there's an earthquake? The people who first come to the region are the first responders. It could be policemen, it could be firefighters, and so on and so forth. But it increasingly, fake news will cause trouble for first responders to reach people on time, and the loss could be more if because of fake news, as opposed to if there was legitimate information being transferred. And then how do we spot fake news? When you see a quick article being sent in your WhatsApp, it may confirm your bias. But we are all professionals here in various different situations of disaster management or risk, or professors or students or social workers. So how do we spot this? Do we also send like an average person, oh, I see this, yeah, see, my religion is saying this is correct, so this news has to be correct, or my belief system, we immediately transfer. But as professionals, we need to take a step back and consider the source and start to have a little bit of critical thinking on where did this story come from? This looks a little bit suspicious to me. And when you see a headline, just don't forward it. Read beyond the headlines. Most often agencies spread only the headline, but the content will be nothing like the headline. And then check the author. Does the author have a bias, or is it a legitimate author? Internet can be anybody. So just check and support the right sources, check the date, and see sometimes there are satirical sites which present news as if real. And I've seen many times leaders in many countries share satirical or joke sites as real news. So you should check. And your own bias. I mean, as an average person, we can't expect them to not to have bias. But as professionals dealing with disaster management or social work or working with humanitarian crisis, we need to constantly check our bias. Am I thinking about this news because of the way I am or because of my religion, or is it because it's factual? And then if you still can't, you can always ask experts or check a legitimate government source or other sources that are legitimate. This is how you spot fake news. But how do we address those fake news? Once you are in a disaster situation and you see fake news spreading, we need to get to the root of the problem. That is how we have to reduce it systematically. What are the causes of misinformation? Why is it rumor spreading in Chennai? Or why is rumor spreading in Maharashtra, or wherever it is that you're dealing with? And how does this information spread in this question? And thirdly, what are the best practices in that situation? These are, again, as I said, more general overview on what is needed to look at. But every situation can be different. I mean, North India may be different from South India because of cultural regions, or Indonesia may be different from Malaysia and things like that. So while there are general guidelines, you still need to have specific best practices to counter. So I've put together a few things that you can do when you're combating fake news. Again, these are causes that I already reinstated. Causes are misinformation, incorrect information, insufficient information, and opportunistic disinformation. Opportunistic disinformation you can see a lot by people who have political interests. They always try to send selected information or outdated information. Somebody must have done something when they are in a different party or something, and they will use it sometimes to against the news. And incorrect information, intentional versus unintentional. Incorrect information is when you falsely spread wrong information to malign somebody or to prevent some activity being given, or some benefit being given to a group of people. Now, I was talking about best practices. So the people, as you are a government agency or an NGO or something, you should start working with the people first, the best practices, engaging local television, radio, news media to disseminate useful information, connect with the right partners. Again, it doesn't mean local television and radio are all perfect people. There are also vested interests, and as we all know, people who are biased. But we need to identify and leverage right people who are more neutral. It's easy. There are a lot of studies that have been done to show who are more likely to lean towards false information and who are not. So as a government agency, you should be neutral in that, or as a NGO working with the right sources. So engage the right people and constantly build awareness and relationships to ensure only the right news is spread. And secondly, crowdsourcing and influencers are a big news source now. I mean, if you are a millennial or someone born after the 90s, you may have Instagrams or Twitter, and a lot of people get their news from that. So you need to identify who are these top influencers in your city or in your state, and help them to spread this news. In Indonesia, we have a lot of actors, actresses being used by the National Disaster Management Agency here to spread information on the right information on coronavirus, and it spread because people panic about that. And there was news immediately about some zombies being affected because of coronavirus, which was a big scare. And then eventually a couple of actors were brought in to show that that is actually a news clip from a movie called Legend by Will Smith. So things can be immediately diffused if you use the right people. And then train and exercise first responders, people who are in the field facing the disaster, facing the people, facing the situation. They should be trained as well. They shouldn't be just sent, because if you send a first responder to face the crowd which is facing a disaster, and they don't know whether it's false news or true, they will actually make the situation worse. So best practices first is to deal with the right, engaging the right people. Next is the processes. Create a joint information system, whether at a state level or a regional level. Create a joint information system. The last colleague who spoke had a lot of systems on how to systematically synthesize and build a strategy. So create, it can be a virtual one, it can be a radio one, it can be an online one. Create this joint information system so public information can be coordinated across agencies, whether it's non-profit or profit or companies. You ensure that there is one coordinated center which acts as a legitimate source. For coronavirus, a lot of us use WHO or Johns Hopkins. Both of them are legitimate sources, but that's a joint information center. And then we again take some data from that and map out individually across countries how does it work. And then prepare pre-scripted messages which are targeting specific place disaster agency, because many times fake news experts are ones who are very good in using hashtags, and hashtags help web crawlers and other social media tools to spread the news faster. So as a government agency, you should fight fire with fire. As an NGO, you should fight with fire with fire. So you should create scripted messages which highlight legitimate news sources. And then prepare draft visuals, graphics, photos, and videos, potential disaster scenarios, and archive this so they are rapidly accessible. You'll be surprised to know the number of people working on fake news have so much skilled professionals working for them. So they design this legitimate looking false news. So in order to counter them, we should be able to invest in news items. Otherwise, whatever plans we do as an agency can fall flat if people don't believe you or think does not believe in the right news. The last one I want to talk about in best practices is technology. A central website for any disaster is useful. I mean, I know there is National Disaster Agency's own website, and they have created one for coronavirus. And for coronavirus, for example, they have a lot of portals. In Indonesia, there are specific portals for specific regions for volcanoes. In the US, they have specific for forest fires. In Australia, they are for forest fires. So have a central website which is legitimate, which has a secure. Sometimes I'm surprised to see government agencies not having the secure logo, because it just costs a little bit extra to get that secure logo. So your website doesn't start with just HTTP, but has HTTPS and has a lock symbol. So you can create that central website, and tweet hyperlinks and sample tweets can be used to counter mass spread of false information with mass spread of correct information, thereby debunking the existing spread of false information. But there are still challenges with regards to fighting fake news, because there are still legal issues when you spread information fast, because many people are afraid, especially in the US, for instance. If you say something is fake news, they will sue you saying, no, this is not fake news, this is what I believe in. In India, it's not so much, and Indonesia is not so much. You can actually fight news without the problem of having legal issues. But in many countries, legally combating fake news is not a institutionalized system yet. And lack of buy-in. Sometimes maybe you are the only one concerned with fake news, or a few of the agencies of concern, but some of them are not worried about it. They actually want the fake news to spread, so they have their political motives or situations improve. So lack of buy-in is a problem. And privacy is sometimes when you share news about a situation where we can have, if you're taking an aerial photograph of a slum or a flooded area, people may be concerned that you're taking photographs of themselves in distress. I mean, all of us want to be presented nicely, even in disaster. I don't want to be seen in a disaster situation. But sometimes if you see newspaper, they keep highlighting people are already in pain, but they keep highlighting. So how do you feel right now? You just had an earthquake, or your somebody had an accident in your family. What do you think? And they keep pushing them. Recently, an actor died in India, Mr. Rajput, and his family was hounded by news media. So there's no privacy. They're already dealing with laws. And then you highlight. So when you deal with fake news, countering fake news also, you need to consider privacy factors. And funding. Unfortunately, except the tech giants, which like Google and Facebook, there are not many funding, especially for combating fake news, as much as there is for other issues. Largely because there is a big lobby on promoting fake news around the world, and they keep fighting. But government agencies and donors are waking up to the challenges of fake news, and there is increase in funding both at government and private levels. And so hopefully these can be shared. In India, there is no specific law on fake news per se, but these are some of the sections on the Indian Penal Code and the Disaster Management Act and Information Technology Act, which are generally used to combat fake news. And I'm sure my colleagues at the Disaster Management Agency know this better. Especially during coronavirus situation, these were again invoked to prevent spread of misinformation about any lockdown issues or others that are coming up. So there is provisions in the Indian Penal Code, but nothing specific. But at the same time, all of these laws exist for sure. Laws have been existing, but ultimately it's up to us as individuals to combat fake news. It's every individual's responsibility, because you can have a great plan, you can have a strategy. One of the things that I'm engaged now is called political economy analysis, where you can design some intervention that is technically sound, but if you don't understand the cultural and political context in which that intervention is introduced, or in this case, a disaster is being averted, then fake news will spread very fast. So that's why, even though you may have laws, you may have a lot of strategies to plan, ultimately it's all of us to check our own biases, our own forwards. Don't forward before you know what it is for, whether it's helping out, especially if you're a government agency or an NGO person, then you need to be more responsible than an average individual into combating fake news. So that's it. I mean, this is something I wanted to reiterate. Consider the source, read beyond, check the author, support the sources, check the date, see if it's a parody or a joke. Check your own biases, which is very important, because our biases lead to transferring of false information fast. And then ask the experts and ensure that fake news is not preventing hard work done by agencies like Disaster Management Agency and other NGOs to combat natural disasters. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, sir. We have a few questions. The first question is, how media content should be checked and filtered? Because talking about local communities, they do believe what media says and flashes as breaking news.
That's why I said we have legal issues to block on someone, right? In the internet, anyone can post anything. It's not like those days where there is a hard copy newspaper and then you can challenge the author and the next day they will come up and say, sorry, I made a mistake. But today news spreads so fast. I mean, I didn't have time to put a lot of examples of how fast fake news spreads. So we can't really filter what's out there. But two things is, legally we can steps to ensure that even before media fake news spreads, the government agencies and NGOs and other private sector work together to put out the right information. So people are aware at all levels. Nearly everyone has a mobile phone, at least a SMS receiving phones. So use those resources to send the right WhatsApp, for example, write the right messaging. But after it's out there, send countering mechanisms. And third is the punitive action, where you use laws to block and stop. With posting something immediately, we can't immediately stop because it's the internet. But that's why if it's your own responsibilities, you make sure you are blocking and you're not sending your biases out. But if you see it outside, when a disaster strikes, set up this central database and make sure people are. And then there are three steps. One is the countering the false information with facts using a central database. The second is ensuring these fake news are censored. And third is taking punitive or punishment actions towards the people who spread that news. Any further questions?
Sir, I have another question.
Hear me, sir? Yeah. Is postmodernism also responsible for this post-truth era? That's the question.
I don't know what you mean by postmodernism in the context. I mean, are you suggesting like modern values? I would say, like I said, fake news is not a new phenomenon. I showed you the example from this, the Nazi propaganda newspaper. So fake news has always existed in one form or the other. But for sure, modern technology has enabled the spread pretty fast. So I don't know if it is philosophically the reason, and the reason why we believe in fake news that I listed about in terms of illusory truth effect or confirmation bias. These are things again existed as long as human beings have existed. Sometimes religion also uses the ability of influencing human beings to do certain things that are not originally meant in their texts, like suicide bombs or the Spanish Inquisition, and these things, kind of things. In all religions exist violence. These are not originally in the propagated by the religion, but certain people use that to their advantage. So it's not really a postmodern phenomena, but the rate at which it spreads is certainly a modern phenomena, due to which it's more careful. We need to be more careful because of the power of the social media and internet.
But I'm unmute and talk.
So in this crisis that we are in, who controls the fake news? Sometimes even the government sections are responsible for spreading fake news. There's a question.
Yeah, it depends. In some countries, some governments employ people to ensure they are targeting. It's the new strategy. You don't need to actually go to war anymore. You just need to. When you say war, it's not like landing in the beaches of Normandy or a ship arriving in some port. Information or by digital terrorism or information warfare is what is the modern warfare. So people spread false information. I mean, recently they found that Twitter removed so many Russian bots or Chinese bots, and in the news there was one Indian company which was controlling 265 fake news sites to influence European Parliament decisions and things like that. So it is the new warfare, and so that is why we need to combat it. Fake news not only affects crisis and disaster, it affects all walks of our life, right from governance to politics to policy to religion and financial matters, and even able to influence stock market crashes and real estate and so on and so forth. So it is a serious problem which needs a serious solution. And that is why, as professionals, we need to be a little bit more awake. And I listed some ways you can combat fake news in that document. Feel free to share the PowerPoint with the colleagues. So yeah, that is the new warfare, and that's why we need to look at it like a warfare.
Is there any plagiarism like checkup, sir? We have a plagiarism software like that. Is there any checking measures?
So there are, like if you saw in my PowerPoint, let me try to share it again. The first slide is has a news article. Let me share it again. Share content. So there are many websites like FactCheck, PolitiFact, and other technology science, and Google has a Google News initiative, which is brand new. These are the ones that are trying to combat fake news. So those are the sites that we can rely on. Can you see my slide?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm just expanding this. So this is a assessment of assessment of the mapping by this independent source on how news agencies in the US fare against liberal and conservative. So they have options on green rectangle, yellow, fair interpretation of the news, unfair interpretation of the news, nonsense, damaging to public discourse. So they rank them based on that, starting from who are the ones that are most legitimate, starting from here, Palmer Report and all that, and then they go up to InfoWars, which is a very fake news, which a lot of people in India also think is true, but and then Fox News falls somewhere between fair and unfair and things like that. So they have mapped it based on liberal and conservative and partisan bias, and some of them being neutral, saying they don't care about either this or that, but they are more on the progressive side. So this is trying to map more or less about liberal and conservative parties in the US. So like that, there are multiple sites around the world which fact check information. You can always post a link and say whether it's a fact, and they come up with news. I saw somebody typing that the CNN is fake news, blah blah. That is again a line pushed by fake news sites, because they want to paint anything that is true or against them as fake news. That is also a problem. Sometimes it's not really fake news, but because it challenges your own bias, you will immediately call it fake news. That's why I said one of the first ways to check fake news is to check your own bias. Are you saying this is fake news because of your own bias, or are you believing this to be true because of your bias? So it's okay for an average person to have biases, but if you are in disaster management and if you are a NGO head or something, then you should stop having, or at least try to fight your biases on a daily basis when you deal with national disasters, because what you think can impact a lot of people. Because if you think, no, these people don't deserve disaster risk management because of a news article you read, then you're going to ignore an entire section of people. So that is why this is something we have to fight on a daily basis.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one question. How does disaster response differ from the rural areas and the cities? Because even after so many measures, the team never reaches the needy. Mr. Hafiz?
Well, thank you. That's a very good question, very valid one. Because previously, or maybe until today, there's a structural failure in recognizing the importance of the urban and rural nexus. This means that there should be a very clear definition and understanding about the differences, the similarities and gaps, and also things that could complement the division between urban and rural. So as a practicing urban designer, the whole understanding of the demographics, the whole situation of an urban context and rural context, whether it is infrastructural links, whether it is information and communication ability, that allows information to travel across urban and rural divide, needs to be rectified. And that's the reason why there is such a challenge in doing that. So I think the first thing that we need to do is to get the things right by really understanding the division, but at the same time acknowledge that that division or differences shouldn't be a gap. Any differences between urban and rural, whether it is capacities, whether it is challenges or problems, should be complementary to each other, if you get what I mean.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Hafiz and